It's Giles Brown.
Dance with the Devil, the Cozy Powell story, has been revamped, enlarged, given a turbocharge. I'm delighted to say that friend of the show, Laura Shenton, joins us live on the line to talk all things cozy. Laura, good to have you back. How you doing?
Hi, hello, hi everybody. It's good to be back.
It's been a while, hasn't it? This has been a while indeed. What was it like revisiting then your book, sort of the cozy, Dance with the Devil?
It was a really, really enjoyable process. It's weird actually. This interview is taking place today on the 21st of March, and the book came out on the 20th of March 5 years ago.
Wow.
The original. So doing the revamping was really enjoyable because a lot more information's available.
I was going to say, so what was the reason that you decided to revamp it? What had come to light about Cozy, or why did you have a look at it and go? Because all writers say I could have trimmed this a bit or gone a bit longer with that. I mean, what was the spark that said, okay, I want to put some more in this one?
Simply because more information became available, and obviously, when you get reviews as well, people will say, oh, I'd have liked to have known more about this. Nobody ever says I didn't want to know about something. That's good. But there was a lot more scope to, we just had more information. And I think if you're active with research anyway, you're always going to stumble across things. But the sheer amount of what we were getting made us say, oh, let's do a second edition. We've got more to tell the people. So that's what we did.
I suppose one of the things as well is because, as I always say, rock fans are fans like no other. And they will have, because if you know Cozy Powell, because a lot of people just think, oh, Cozy Powell, maybe remember her from Dance with the Devil, etc. But there was so much, there's Jeff Beck, there's the Beck Group, he's a session musician for virtually everybody. He plays, obviously he plays with Shenton Group. I mean, he plays with, he just plays with everybody basically, doesn't he?
Yeah, and that's the thing that really matters. On the surface, you've just, a lot of people think, oh yeah, he had a single, he played with Rainbow for a bit, but there's so much more, Whitesnake, Jeff Beck, Black Sabbath,
yeah.
Brian May, and that really matters. And I think a lot of people who enjoy rock music, there's always that thing where you think, oh, what other bands did they play and what other records were they on? And that book very much, fills in those gaps for anyone who's keen to know about that.
And not only that, but you see, you bring up a book like this out to rock fans, and they'll suddenly say, well, they will come forward with the information saying, well, I saw them here, and I've got this bootleg, and I've got this information, and suddenly it kind of takes on a life of its own, I suppose, because you put it out there as a taster, and then all this, just to see what happens. It's like fishing. You put something out there, and the next thing you know, you've got a great white, you've got, a blue whale on the end of your line.
Yeah, we were really lucky in that regard. I say we, me and the publisher, because people did get in touch after the release of the first edition to say, oh, I've got this information, I've got that information. And, we always said, oh, great, can we include it? Can we give you a mention? And people were really, really awesome and really kind and, helpful in saying, and it helped us fill in a lot of gaps about his early years prior to him becoming famous. So there's all sorts of information in the second edition about early gigs, people he worked with, just those nice little things that fill in the information that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to get.
Yeah, because he's not born Cozy, is he? It's Colin, isn't it? I mean, he's born Colin. So where is his early influences then that you discovered? Give us a little bit about the background that you discovered, because I had a quick flick through it, and some of the things that I found really interesting about that sort of late 60s stuff.
Yeah, so like you say, he was born Colin, and there's actually a lot of vagueness about what his birth second name would have been like. That's how far back we went, so he was adopted, and there was a lot of haziness surrounding that. And just, I think, in terms of the life lottery, I mean, I'd never want to speak on behalf of anybody to a great extent, but he was lucky. His adoptive parents were lovely. They were an older couple who really supported him to do his music, getting his first drum kit, letting him go off and do, he wasn't sort of born into that musical household, but he was given the opportunity from his adoptive parents, and I think that really matters, from being in bands from his sort of mid-teens onwards.
It's interesting. I mean, did he start drumming? I don't know. Was he sort of jazz drumming? Because I'm thinking, because he hooks up with Dio, when they have Rainbow, and Dio had been basically a doo-wopper, hadn't he, in the States in the early days? I mean, did he sort of do his drum academy sort of thing by playing with, I don't know, those sort of not skiffle, but you know what I mean, those sort of early '60s sort of pop band sort of stuff, or was he always into sort of, I don't know, R&B type of things?
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about everyone who was in Rainbow. Like they became sort of iconic for that sort of heavy metal sound. I use the term heavy metal lightly, but like Dio, they all started off with what was typical of late '60s music.
Yeah.
So it wasn't sort of heavy. It was just like a bit of R&B, a bit of blues. And I think that's evidenced with all their hairstyles on the early singles that they were on.
And the other thing that I really like about the thing is it's, heavy metal, that you use lightly, comes from a particular part of the world. I'm from Stoke-on-Trent, so I'm just, I used to live down the road from where Lemmy was born, in Madeley. So there's that whole black country scene. And one of the wonderful things about this, because I read Ozzy's book a while back, was the fact that, they, in Birmingham, they were bumping into each other. And he's around the Birmingham area, isn't he? Because he's bumping into like Plant and Bonham, who will be obviously an influence in his drum style, or they'll be, at the same time. And even sort of Noddy Holder, because people tend to think that all that Slade ever did was Merry Christmas, but Slade were quite, were heavy at the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like a lot of those bands that, people think of as, they pigeonhole them. Like they were all they knew each other. So for example, Cozy Powell, when he was with Black Sabbath, he'd known Tony Iommi for years prior to that, and Iommi had wanted to work with him for a long time. So they all sort of knew each other, and there were constantly rumours throughout Powell's career. Oh, is he going to join Led Zeppelin at some point? It's like, no, it's just rumours. But yeah, you're right. Everybody sort of knew each other. It was a very sort of tight-knit scene. Yeah,
and they weren't competitive either. So that's that whole situation. I mean, because you had the sort of the southern crowd who was like Kenny Jones, Faces, and they all sort of swap, and Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood, etc. But with this whole thing, because he does know people. I mean the Move, which is obviously it's before Wizard. They've got a huge Roy Wood and all that. They've got a huge, because they're Brummies, and they've got a huge influence on what shaping Cozy's career, as it were.
Yeah, it's just reminded me like that the music scene was so tiny. I mean, Bevan eventually went to Black Sabbath for a little bit as well.
ELO drummer, but he's a great drummer. I mean, it's the thing, you think ELO, boo, but if you listen to something like "Don't Let Me Down," that's a drum riff and a half.
Oh, it's brilliant, and the disco influence as well. And I think that's what's great about the careers of a lot of drummers, Cozy Powell, and lots of people who were active around, sort of the 70s and 80s. Like they covered so many different styles, and I think that's what's really interesting about Powell's career. His drumming with Whitesnake is completely different to what he did with Jeff Beck, and that's fascinating. And indeed, Bedlam, one of his earlier bands, it's fascinating to hear all the different styles that these people were capable of.
Well, I really, and he played the Isle of Wight Festival in 1970. Now everybody thinks, Jimmy, they think, Free, doing All Right Now, all that sort of stuff. And he's there, Cozy Powell's there playing, I'm just trying to think the band was. It was Tony Joy White, which is a swamp rock band. I mean, where does that come from?
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? I think the early 70s especially, like, there were so many different styles. I mean, if you listen to your typical sort of 70s compilation record from the early part of that decade, so much versatility. I think for a drummer that must have been fascinating. Yeah,
but at the same time, he quits his early group business because they're playing stuff live, like they're playing Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, and also they're playing Vanilla Fudge, which is Carmena Peace, who is obviously, he comes on to have a huge influence with Vogelbeck Peace, and he goes and plays with Ozzy, and he ends up with the Rod Stewart band because he does Do You Think I'm Sexy? So it's really interesting about he decides the way the journey he takes.
Yeah, and drummers were in really high demand around that period. I mean, from sort of the late 60s onwards, there was constantly work for session music, which Powell did lots of, which ultimately led to him doing Dance with the Devil. It's just so fascinating that, you know, so many drummers got to play on so many different records.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the list, and it's like Suzi Quatro. Okay, I can understand because he just does stuff with Suzi. Hot Chocolate. You know, I mean, it's just like, what? You know, you just think, hey,
yeah.
And they're around and about when Stevie Wonder's doing Superstition, aren't they? Because I think Beck's involved with that.
Yeah, that's right, and it's really interesting in terms of there's this massive sort of did or didn't Cozy Powell play on Superstition, and even he doesn't know. He said that he was active in some sessions, but whether that was the one that ended up, you know, ultimately getting printed on record, even he didn't know.
What's the relationship with Beck like then? Because Jeff Beck is very much the musician. He's a guitar god, but you know, Beck's stuff. I mean, apart from, you know, High Hail, Silver Lining, he's putting serious music out, as opposed, you know, he's doing Focus and all that sort of stuff, rather than trying to perhaps do a Clapton like assault on the track, on the charts and whatever. So, I mean, did they find themselves working sort of really, really well together, or was the relationship sort of? What did you discover anything new about that whole situation?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think Powell and Beck had a respect for each other. So, you know, in the long term, I think that endured, you know, as they both, you know, got older and got on with their careers. But I think at the time it was a bit thorny, because when Beck sort of disbanded his group in the early 70s that Powell was part of, I think it was very much a sort of grumpy, sudden decision, you know, very characteristic of what Jeff Beck was like at that time. But, you know, it's good work that they did together musically. Very, very good listen. I'd recommend it. And
then, of course, we have Dance with the Devil, which is an absolutely huge track, and it gets used everywhere from them because it's Suzi Quatro on the bass, etc. And he forms his own band, which is Cozy Powell's Hammer, and it's got, I mean, you know, Bernie Marsden, who I interviewed a couple of times and was such a lovely guy. And Don Airey, who's still around and about. So, you know, this was quite a combination, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the rapport that Powell had with Don Airey is fantastic. Like, even on Powell's solo albums that he did in the late 70s, I mean, Don Airey played keyboard on that, and that's a great album. Really, really enjoyable. Theme 1, the opening track, that's brilliant. And, you know, and obviously they played together. Powell and Airey, they played together in Rainbow on Down to Earth. Great album, brilliant. Yeah. And a lot of people don't like Down to Earth because they say, oh, it's not classic Rainbow, but I think it's a stunner. Love it. Lost in Hollywood, epic drumming.
Rainbow, why do you think he went? Because, I mean, Richie Blackmore can be, shall we say, interesting, eccentric, if not downright, you know, a pain in the proverbials. So what do you think the attraction was for him to, because he was 5 years in Rainbow, and other, you know, people were dropping in and out of the whole situation. So what do you think the situation, do you think it was what do you think was the reason he stayed with Rainbow for 5 years was?
I think it's lovely, what was achieved, you know, with Powell's time in Rainbow, because it was just one of those bands where, you know, Powell basically said in interviews at the time and afterwards, he basically said, you know, people are a bit scared of Richie. He's the boss. If you don't like it, get out, kind of thing. But with Blackmore, I think Powell had that ability to assert himself, and he was very much like a lead figure in the band rather than someone who was just going to get booted out at whim. And I think they got on well as friends as well, you know, and that comes across in how they, you know, they met up in the 90s and they just had a laugh about the whole thing. And indeed, Blackmore presented a very, you know, please come and join the band. You know, Blackmore very much wanted Powell to be there, to the extent that he was able to sort of draw Powell away from his racing career to be able to join the band.
Because he was a petrolhead, wasn't he? He was mad about cars.
Yeah, and at the time he joined Rainbow, he was very much on the up with his racing career. And the second edition, there's loads more about the racing. That was one thing we didn't cover in the first edition that we've put loads about in the second edition.
Was it touring cars? Was he racing touring cars? Because he wasn't single-seaters, was he? He was racing big sort of like What was he racing? I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah, for Formula 3. So
Okay.
lots of sponsorship. He even took part in some of the celebrity races that were sort of broadcast on BBC Radio 1 with the other DJs doing it. And we've got loads of information in the new book about, who was racing and what position they came in. And it was a really big thing for him. He really cared about the racing. And throughout his career, he'd often say, if music doesn't work out, I'm going back to the racing.
I'm pretty much the same on this one. But he leaves Rainbow because Blackmore has an epiphany, which isn't a Friday afternoon cocktail, but he's seeing bands, and it's the time when sort of FM comes in. It's all that sort of AOR radio, and he realizes that, he really wants a big stateside hit, doesn't he? So he goes down that whole since it's been gone sort of thing, so Powell goes off to do his own thing once again before hooking up with Whitesnake. Now, this is an interesting period of Whitesnake, isn't it? 82 to 85, because they've done Ready and Willing, that huge thing, and it's before they go really, really big hair, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Powell was lucky in the sense that he was part of Whitesnake at a really pivotal time for the band. So it wasn't the big 1987 album, but it wasn't sort of the early days either. And I actually really like that album, Slide It In. I don't think there's a bad track on it, but I think it must have been a tricky band to be part of because they had a lot of messing about with the other personnel, which guitarist played on which versions of the album. So, the UK one's different to the US one slightly. I think it only feels like a different listen if you really nerd out on it.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the Whitesnake albums were, but it was before they went, Cavalier went full LA and big hair and all that lot. And then again, we said about, we go back to the sort of the Tony Iommi thing, the Sabbath situation, because, he's asked back, and he does a brilliant job with Black Sabbath.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can sort of tell that he enjoyed playing with that band. I mean, on the album, if you look at the sleeve notes of Headless Cross, he is evident that he really cared about what he was doing, and that's a great album. I think vocally as well, it's a really good one.
So, how do you handle kind of what happens? Because it's really, really sad, isn't it? I mean, the way it all come. And then I remember, being really, really shocked because is it 1990, isn't it?
The accident.
The accident, yeah.
Yeah. Easter
98, sorry.
98. Yeah.
So
it is.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's so sad. I mean, everybody, a lot of the musicians who sort of spoke on that said that was just how they all kind of expected Cozy would go like that, and he himself. I don't know. It's really weird. Like people can't imagine that he'd have grown old gracefully. It's still sad though.
Yeah. So when it comes to doing this, one of the things that comes as he was a rock and roller, but it seems that everybody's got a good word to say about him. They're not going, oh well, he was this, that, and the other. He seems to be, when he got behind the kit, he was absolutely professional, and people wanted to work with him.
Yeah, that's something that really stands out. Obviously, when any artist dies, people always talk well of them because. Yeah. But yeah, even he himself said to work with that many personalities, you've got to be a bit of a psychologist. You've got to be able to sort of know what they want, what they don't want, and to sort of work in sympathy with them, not just as musicians but as people. And that really came across.
What do you think? Do you think he was happier in the studio? Do you think he was happier on the road? Or do you think he was just happy because he was making his living? And as you said, if it didn't work out, he could always go back to the motor racing.
Yeah, in a lot of the interviews that he did, he always sort of said that he was happy just to be playing, whether that be in the studio or live. His live performances are amazing because of all the, the special effects and the overture and stuff like that. But I think what probably made him very desirable as a drummer for the other musicians to work with is that he was just happy to rock up and do a great job. You know, and you don't get that. I mean, Ginger Baker, for example, you know, off days.
the other end of the scale, isn't it, with the interesting Mr. Baker?
Yeah.
What are you hoping that people are gonna take from this? I mean, it's obviously, it came out 5 years ago we talked. What are you hoping that people they're gonna rediscover Cozy? Do you think they're going to get a better appreciation, because there's been so much more stuff come out since the first time it came out?
Yeah, I think the second edition and indeed the picture book as well. I think it's just going to give people more insight into the man behind the music. So obviously, I didn't know him personally, and that's really important to stipulate. But you know, in terms of the man who enjoyed his racing, you know, had a nice upbringing, you know, his friends, the people who respected and liked him. I think the second edition, that really comes across. And there's also more musical analysis as well, you know, sort of getting into the why. Why was his drumming so good on a particular song, a particular album? So the second edition's definitely going to open some eyes in, you know, a broader range of areas, really.
Well, the book is called Dance with the Devil, the Cozy Powell story, revised, expanded edition. It's by our good friend Laura Shenton. Laura, if you can order it, by the way, via our Facebook, not our Facebook page, by our website. Excuse me, Laura. Are you doing the social media thing? Are you social mediaing these days? Where can people find what you're up to?
Yeah, so I've got my Facebook page. That's Laura Shenton, author.
Yeah. And
we've also got the Weimer Facebook page and the Weimer website. That's WYMER. They're the publishers for the Cozy Powell books.
And what are you up to next? Because you've done this sort of thing before. Have you got anything inkling in the back of your mind there, Laura, that you're going to do to your next subject?
Yeah, so there's more music books coming out. There's more fiction books coming out. I write full time, so that's like I live it and breathe it. So that was the case when we did the second edition. You know, it was very much, you know, live and breathe that for the period of writing and research.
Absolutely wonderful. It's been lovely to have back on. The book is called, obviously, Dance with the Devil, the Cozy Powell story. It's revised, expanded, and you can order it via our own virtual bookstore. Laura, it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you again, and we'll speak very, very soon indeed.
Thank you.
Go on, you know you want to.